my fellow comic book collectors, it's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and this is the Wednesday video where I answer your questions. Each week, I basically get questions the previous week, and then I answer them the next week. So that's what's happening here. If you have a question you want to ask me, just put it in the comments below, and I will answer it next week. We've got some pretty great questions. I have a lot of stuff to show, actually. So let's get right into it. The first question comes from AJ Guiz, who wrote, my question is, in the Golden Age period, just prior to the Atomic Age, which genres, titles, and characters were most popular comic sales-wise, and which IPs originating from the comics influenced pop culture and the most in the pre-atomic era? So obvious ones would be like Captain America, and another one would be, so Golden Age from the, okay, so Atomic Age is really 1946 to 1956. Some people extend it all the way up to 1960. So really we're looking at the age between 1938 and 45. So you got Superman, you got Captain America, you got Captain Marvel, you have Submariner, you have all the big characters, and those, those superhero characters were kind of the ones that defined the Golden Age, in terms of the ones that got the whole thing started. Like Superman was kind of like the key character to start the Golden Age. But then you also had within the Golden Age, within that era before the Atomic Age, one of the things that people have to understand is that Atomic Age is kind of one of these weird ages that kind of goes across both the golden and the silver. So golden goes up to 1956 or 55 really, and the silver starts at 55 and goes beyond. Once the Comic Code Authority comes into play, usually that's when people consider that Silver Age. But you got the Atomic Age that kind of goes over both, overlaps those two other ages. So yeah, so the Atomic Age is really defined by the atomic bomb dropping, and really a lot of sci-fi books kind of define that age. But prior to the Atomic Age is all the war books, the crime books were kind of getting their start. Even the superhero stuff, those were all of the Golden Age. But you also had the funny animals. A lot of funny animal books were being created. So some of the ones that kind of started in the Golden Age, but then kind of faded out by the end of the by the Atomic Age, end of the Atomic Age, were pretty much most comics, like, because the Atomic Age kind of ends when the code comes into play. So you got a lot of books just getting dropped. I'm going to show you some that dropped that I collected. Yeah, I'll give you a sense of some of them. So as I was saying, crime, definitely. So we got Crime Does Not Pay. This is from 1946. So right at the beginning of the Atomic Age. So yeah, so, and Crime Does Not Pay really ran from 1942 all the way up till the end of the Golden Age, which was 1956. They tried to go beyond once the code came into play, but it didn't really work. it died out. So this would be kind of that pre-Atomic Age going into Atomic Age book. Okay, and then we have a very typical Golden Age World War II book is something like Thrilling Comics. And again, this didn't survive. Once the Comic Code Authority came in, Thrilling died. Even the publisher died. I mean, a lot of these, it wasn't just the titles that would die. It was the whole existence of the publisher. Once the Comic Code Authority came into play, we're talking about thousands of publishers that disappeared overnight. So but this is very typical for that war era and superhero era of the Golden Age, early Golden Age, World War II era, pre-atomic, where you'd have a lot of propaganda covers. Even the funny animals, I mentioned that earlier, they would have propaganda covers. So because everything was geared towards promoting the war effort. So you'd see a lot of war bonds, even like in the Disney comics, you'd see the war bonds, you'd see war-related stuff. Now that didn't fly very well after the war was done. People were kind of like, okay, let's move away from that. Let's get back to just regular life. And then you sort of had the rise of the atomic age. So once the atomic bomb kind of marked the end of the war, but also marked the end of that era of the propaganda covers and certain styles of comics of the Golden Age. Then you get into the atomic age, which really was like good girl, romance, more crime, but different genres kind of dominated the whole atomic age. But this was the style of the pre-atomic age. What other ones? Other books, actually, a good example of how harsh the atomic age was on some of these the Golden Age books. If you look at Captain America, okay, Captain America really tried to survive that shift. So what happened was it went from 1941 was when Captain America #1 came out, and it was the famous punching Hitler in the face cover. And then it ran till 1949, so into the atomic age, but then really faded. Like it just didn't have, people were kind of moving away from the superheroes. DC managed to keep its superheroes running, but Marvel really couldn't do it. Within the later issues of the Captain America, it actually switched over to pre-code horror. It changed genres into pre-code horror because, as I said, people weren't as interested in those superheroes, especially the ones that were associated with the war effort. So Captain America really did suffer. But they did try to restart it in 1954, but then it failed again. It only lasted a few issues, from like issues 76 to 78, really like 3 issues, not really that much. And then it had to wait until the Silver Age to restart. So this is the kind of attitude that happened with things changing. Another series that I really like, and this is one from my Vixen's Kickstarter book, is America's Best Comics. Now, America's Best Comics ran from 1942 to 1949. So you can see, like, this is kind of that, a little bit of the good girl, a little bit of superhero, and it also didn't survive. It didn't even survive well into the atomic age. It only survived a couple of years within the atomic age. So, but a great title. It has Miss Mask, which was one of the characters from my Kickstarter. Okay. Okay. And what else can I say? So hopefully it answers your questions. Now, hi Alan, can you show some of show the comic of your good girl pinups, which you use to reference for collecting? Sure. So that is this book. Let's grab it. This one. There's a few of them. There's a few other titles, and they show them on the back. Babes in Peril and Fighting Babes. These kind of show really good covers. So this is obviously Phantom Lady #17. But if you open it up, it is just pinups. You can see all the different pinups. And it just shows classic covers from the Golden Age. And I've been kind of working on getting all of these. They're hard to get, most of them. But I would say I'd have the majority of them, but not all, obviously. Like I have this one on the side over here. It's one of my favorite. Get some others, some planets, Starling Comics. Some really great covers. I mean, I have both of these, for example. And get some more Planet Comics, Captain Science. So just a really great reference if you're looking for good covers from the Golden Age. This is a great book for that. So Babes in Bondage. It's called the Golden Age of Comics, Babes in Bondage. So you can look for that. It costs, I think, about $20. So it's a good reference. I really enjoy it. And what else did you ask? Also, what was the star code? So, William, the star code was, if you look right here, that's the star code. And this was a precursor to the Comic Code Authority. So the Comic Code Authority came in really into play end of 1954, but you didn't really see it on comics until 1955. And this was one that was kind of created because Frederick Wortham, was very vocal all through the 40s into the 50s. And so this code was kind of created as a prep, I don't know, like they were preparing for action to be taken against the comics. And this was a way of kind of combating it early. Now, it was ACMP that you'll notice that above. I'll say it's really small, you can barely read it, but the point is it's ACMP, which is Association of Comic Magazine Publishers. And this code ran from 1947 to 1954. And it just, it was modeled off the Hollywood public production code and also the Hays Code. And it was also known as the Star Seal of Approval. And I'll show you a few other books that have it. You can see, sometimes they made it bigger. You can see it's a little bit bigger on this one. And so that's Battlefield. Another one that has it, another one. This is Wild. Another Atlas one. Atlas. So a bunch of publishers actually took part. So it was Atlas, Hillman, Gleason, EC Comics, and also Harold Moore, which was actually the one that produced Famous Funnies. So they all took part in the code. However, they really loosely took part in the code. It was kind of very, very weak attempt at following the code guidelines. They actually had similar guidelines to the Comic Code Authority, but nobody really followed it that well. And EC actually pulled out and of following the code. It did have it on, like, you can actually find EC Comics with the star code on them, but you'd be like, oh, really? Like, does this really have some weird code? You know, it's very loosely followed. So once they pulled out, it kind of fell apart. But then not much later, you get the true Comic Code Authority coming into play, and history was rewritten at that point. So yeah, so that's the comic ACMP, or the Star Seal of Approval. So, okay, the next question comes from JSS Brooklyn. What is the difference between a comic book with a restored grade versus a conserved grade? Do you have examples of each? What are your thoughts? Okay, so I do. I brought a couple books to show. So the main thing is any comic with a specific repairs done to improve the structural integrity and long-term preservation of the comic, those are considered conservation. But a better way of thinking of it is when somebody restores a comic, they're really trying to improve the aesthetics of the comic, not necessarily improve the structural integrity or anything else about the comic, but really just trying to make it look prettier than it really is. So that's kind of the intent is different between the two. But a lot of the things that happen between restoration and conservation are the same. So restoration, can be a lot of things, but with conservation, here are some of the things that you can do with conservation: tear seals, staple replacement, pieces reattached. You can even do some types of cleaning with and get a conserved grade. So those are all legit. You can also do, basic things to improve the paper quality. There's things that you can do to reinforce the paper. So those are all considered conservation. Now, things that are not considered conservation are reglossing. When you see sometimes they try to regloss the cover to make it look like newer. Trimming, obviously, is not considered conservation. And non-archival glue. Those are all things that will get you like a restored label rather than a conserved label. And I'll show you the difference. So here's an example of a conserved book. This is my Police Comics number 11, first appearance of the Spirit. And this is a 5.0 conserved. And you'll notice the conserved books have this gray label on blue. Sometimes you can actually get fooled where you think, oh, I bought a blue label, but it's actually conserved. So be careful of that. Look for that extra gray label at the top. Now, this one is conserved because it's really lame. Conservation includes cover reinforced. You could actually remove this one. So that's the great thing about conservation is generally the conservation can be removed fairly easily. So this is the cover's been reinforced, probably could be easily removed, and we get probably a 4.0 or 4.5 restored, not restored, blue label. So it's one of those things. It's a very minor restoration or conservation, I should say. Okay, so that's that one. Now we're going to compare it to another Police Comics. This is my Police Comics number 1, and this one is restoration. It's a moderate B3, and you'll see these different letters and number combinations on restored books. The letter represents the quality of the restoration. How good is the restorer? So A, B, C. Now, A is professional, B is like semi-professional, and C is amateur. So this is B, so that means that it's semi-professional. 3 so the numbers from 1 to 5 represent how much restoration has happened. So 1 is very minor amounts of restoration, maybe slight color touch or something very minor. A 5 means that it's extensive restoration. Now a 3 means that it's moderate. It's sort of in between the two. And this one, the restoration includes color touch, pieces added, reinforced. So that's it. So moderate restoration. Okay. So probably on this one, I would guess that it's probably a fair amount of color touch. That is the reason why it gets that 3 denotation. Now you can't do color touch and get a conserved grade. Generally, again, it's not about making the book look better. It's about preserving it for conserved grade books. That's the big difference between the two philosophies. Another way of thinking about it is if the work that's being done on the book is of high quality, where it can be reversed, then generally that will get a more conserved grade. But not all conservation is reversible. So some conservation does include where they will actually add paper to the book, where it will be basically rebuilt. to you know, make it a complete comic. So sometimes the cover is falling apart, or maybe it's in pieces. Well, you can do why am I forgetting the word? I'm forgetting the word. You can do you can use pulp and then kind of put it on to basically merge the paper, or have it become solid again. Oh man, I'm forgetting the term for that. I don't know why I'm forgetting the term for that. But the point is, that kind of conservation can be actually reversed, but generally there will be damage. There's certain ones where they use archival glue. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of ones that can't be reversed. It's a hard one. But yeah, so certain things with conservation, I guess sometimes types of cleaning can't be reversed or can be still detectable. I'm not sure. But for the most part, the goal of conservation is not to necessarily improve the look of the book, but it is to preserve it. That's the big thing. My thoughts on both of these. I actually prefer restoration over conservation. I know it sounds weird, because I do like the aesthetics of the book. I want it to present better. So if I'm buying a book and I know it's restored, where it's got a purple label already, I'm looking for the least amount of restoration, but I'm also looking for that the book to look and present better. So I love it when it's a high grade, like my Police Comics #1, where it's a 7.0, looks great, and it gets that restored label, and I'm getting it for a fraction of the cost. So there's certain times where I don't mind restoration. So I generally prefer restoration over conservation for that reason, that it will present better. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. I'm probably weird in that respect. Okay, next question comes from KMunn. Are there any particular comics you like so much that you own multiple copies? Are there any particular Marvel What If books you would recommend? Thanks again, always, for your insight. Okay, so generally, what happens with me is I do like certain books. If you look above me, they're The Perfect Crime right there. Actually, I bought that book multiple times. And it's not that I want to have multiple copies of the book. I'm not really into multiple copies. I just want to have a nice presenting one. So generally, if it's a lower grade and I can upgrade, and it's not that much of a shift, where I can sell the old one, or and just upgrade, then I don't mind doing that. So generally I will buy certain books that I really like. I really like that Perfect Crime one, so I will generally upgrade. I'll try to find a better copy. That's generally, if I really like a book, I'll try to look for a better copy. I've done that with many books in my collection, where I've bought nicer copies just because I wanted something that presented a little bit better, and I regretted wasting so much money on a not such a great presenting book. So sometimes I make that mistake, but yeah, so those are the kind of examples of that. In terms of What If, I'm only going to reference the 1977 series of What If. There's actually multiple series of What If, but the 77 one, obviously you want to get What If #1, just because it's the first of the series, and I was like having the bookends of the series, so get the first issue. But the next one that you might want to consider is What If #10, and this is the first appearance of Jane Foster as Thor. It's not canon, so it doesn't really count. There's another book that counts as her first appearance as Thor, but really, for all intensive purposes, it is her first appearance as Thor, and it's a great one because it's an homage to Journey into Mystery 83, which is the first appearance of Thor. So great book, just a cool one altogether. Yeah, had some significance in terms of the recent movie. Too bad the movie was terrible. So that's one. Another one that's actually got some movie association to it is What If Spider-Man? What if Spider-Man had never become a crime fighter and he becomes a magician? And he basically has the cape of Doctor Strange. And this was kind of hot because if you remember the Spider-Man Doctor Strange movie, there's a scene where there's Spider-Man has the cape, and yeah, so that's that's the connection. Actually, it happens a couple times in the Spider-Man movie. In Spider-Man No Way Home, it happens, and also I think it happens in Endgame. So yeah, this is a good one. So yeah, so this is Spider-Man What If number 19. And now other ones that you might want to consider are What If number 34, which is the first appearance of Obnoxious the Clown. It's a kind of a parody issue, but it also has a yellow Hulk, which could be a potential spec in the future. There's also number 18, which has the first appearance of the evil Doctor Strange. So if you watch the second Doctor Strange movie, well, there was the evil Doctor Strange. Well, he made his first appearance in What If 18. So those are all kind of cool ones. So yeah, hopefully some good reading ones though. So 1, 10, 18, 19, and 34. Okay, next question comes from Deadman, 1957. Hi, Alan. This may have been asked before, but can you tell me who buys these expensive books? Is it just separate individuals who are buying and selling to accumulate enough money to buy big books? Or is it conglomerates buying to sell once the price go up, much like shares? There are a few books I'd like to get just to complete runs, but I can't see me getting any of them anymore. This has to do with my age, being a pensioner. I'm fascinated with your eclectic collection, and obviously you must be a wheeler and dealer to get the number of your superb books. Okay, so generally some of the bigger books like Action 1 or Superman 1 or Batman 1 or Detective 27, the really big books in high grade, those are generally either the super collectors, like a Nicolas Cage would be a great example of that, or they are people who are buying as a almost like a group buy, where they're buying it for the purpose of seeing it as an investment, which they can later resell and hopefully raise their investment. Now, one example of that, I believe, was AF-15, which had that record sale of 3.65 million. What they do is a couple things. They want to have big books on their ledger just to say, hey, we have these books in our collection, because that attracts investors to the pool of funds that they can use to, it's almost like a hedge fund, where they're using these comics as a potential investment vehicle. And so what you have is like just a bunch of comic collectors who are using comics as an investment tool, that pool their money and buy big books. And sometimes when they buy big books, they fail because they later sell these big books for like under the price that they paid for them. But for the most part, they're buying books that they believe are blue chips and will go up over time. So there's that, and there's the mega collectors. So those are the two big groups. Now, some people do manage to flip books where they can move up and gradually get that grail book. That's a little harder. Sometimes what you do see, though, is like I can think of like a few dealers of comics where they buy and sell books, and every so often they want to buy one kind of mega book for their collection. Or sometimes what you'll have is these comic book dealers who will buy and sell books that are high priced, and I don't know who they buy and sell it to, but it could be to other vendors, and it could be just like incestuous, where it's like they're all buying and selling to each other. But generally it's to collectors, like very like the Nicolas Cage kind of collectors, where it's very private sales. So yeah, so there are some mega collectors. There's people with big money, like, no doubt about it. So I'm not one of those people, but I hope to pretend to be one of those people. So yeah, so I think that's really where those people are. Leaf casting. See, I'm like, the whole time that I'm doing this, I'm thinking, what is that term that I needed to remember earlier on? So leaf casting is the conservation method that I was trying to remember. I couldn't remember it. Now I remember. So see, I'm not a complete idiot. I just forget things sometimes. So Fiddle Chips asked, my question is, do you have a comic that holds more sentimental value than monetary value? I have a couple. The one that everyone would probably know if you watch my channel for any length of time is Howard the Duck. I paid $10 for this because it's the one that got me into comic collecting. So it's probably still worth $10 based on the grade. But this is the book that got me started into collecting comics. So sentimental, have it in my collection, probably not going anywhere. Might even get it slabbed. I don't know. just even though it's like not worth getting slabbed, it's, you know, it's just, it is kind of a important book for my collection. And then the other one that's really kind of sentimental to me, this was given to me by my grandmother. It's in really rough shape. I actually was wondering, I looked it up. Like, at one time I looked it up in the old Overstreet guide, and it had a really crazy price. I was like, oh man, it's worth like $10,000. But I was looking at the near mint value. This is not near mint. But I've seen you can get like lower grade copies of this for like a couple $100, $200-300. So yeah, so that looked better than this, by the way. So yeah, I was like, oh, okay, it's not super valuable, but it is sentimental value because it is my my first old book as well, and it was given to me by my grandmother. So kind of a little bit important that way. So yeah, so those are the two sentimental ones. Last question comes from Matt, who asked, are there any popular books from Rifleman, or is it just the Naughty book that is the only one of note? So if you're not familiar with the Rifleman, where did I put it? Okay, put it over here. The Rifleman was a series based on a TV series that that was a Western comic. And Western comics, for the most part, aren't really popular. They don't really perform well in terms of comic book collecting. So there's lots of great Western comics. Even in high grade, you can get them fairly affordably from the Golden Age. Except for this one book. Because this one is a bit notorious. And this was the Rifleman. This is from Silver Age. And it is notorious because it's the got wood cover, where you got the very unfortunate placement of the log, and the boy kind of looking very mischievously, and the guy looking down very mischievously at the boy, and just the placement of the log basically makes it a great innuendo cover. Yeah, so that one book from the series has all the value. Pretty much everything else is not that valuable, but it's one that people love just because of the silliness of it. So it is a very sought after book, and that's why it, of all of them, is the key. You can get Rifleman actually started in issue number 2, by the way. There was no Rifleman number 1. It was a previous title that changed over. So yeah, so that's it for that one. If you guys have any questions you'd like to ask me, please put it in the comments below, and hopefully I'll remember everything when I have to say it. And that's all I have to. I don't know, sometimes I forget things. So again, I hope you enjoyed the video regardless, and thanks again for watching. Bye for now.